Marcus looked me in the eye and said the words that broke my heart. "Steve, my 16-year-old son won't even look at me anymore. My wife is sleeping in the guest room. I let everyone down again." This is about more than one man's relapse. It's about how addiction destroys trust and how families can rebuild when the person they love falls down. See, we think addiction recovery is about the person who's struggling. But what I learned from Marcus's story is that addiction is a family disease, and recovery has to be a family healing. When someone relapses after years of sobriety, the family doesn't just lose the person again, they lose hope that recovery is even possible. Marcus had been sober for 8 years. 8 years of showing up, being present, rebuilding trust brick by brick, but one stressful week at work, one moment of weakness, and everything he'd built seemed to crumble. What happened next teaches every family dealing with addiction the difference between a relapse and a collapse. Let me tell you about Marcus Rodriguez from Phoenix. He's 52 years old, owns Rodriguez Construction, a company he built from nothing into $1 million business employing 30 people. Married to Carmen for 22 years, father to Miguel, 16, and Sophia, 14. But Marcus's success story starts with his rock bottom story. 12 years ago, Marcus was a functioning alcoholic who wasn't functioning anymore. He'd drink a six-pack after work to unwind, wine with dinner, more drinks to help him sleep. The wake-up call came when Miguel was 4 years old. Marcus had promised to take him to his t-ball game, but showed up drunk. Not just tipsy, drunk. Miguel looked up at his father, confused and scared, and asked Carmen, "Why does Daddy smell funny and talk weird?" That night, Carmen gave Marcus an ultimatum. "Get sober or get out. I won't let you destroy our children's childhood the way alcohol destroyed yours." Marcus got sober. He went to AA, got a sponsor, worked the steps, attended meetings religiously. For 8 years, he was the poster child of recovery. He sponsored other men, spoke at meetings, turned his construction business into a success story. "I thought I had beaten it," Marcus tells me. 8 years felt like a lifetime. I'd gotten comfortable, maybe even a little cocky. I thought the hard part was over. The relapse didn't happen overnight. It was a perfect storm of stress, complacency, and old patterns colliding. 3 months ago, Marcus landed the biggest contract of his career, a $2.2 million commercial project that would set his family up for life. But the project came with impossible deadlines, city permit issues, and a contractor who kept changing specifications. "I was working 14-hour days, sleeping 4 hours a night," Marcus explains. "My crew was behind schedule, the client was threatening to pull the contract, and I was looking at potentially losing everything I'd built." For the first time in 8 years, Marcus started skipping AA meetings. "I told myself I was too busy, that I didn't need them anymore. I was strong enough to handle stress without drinking." Then Miguel got arrested for possession of marijuana at school. Carmen was devastated, blaming herself for not paying attention while Marcus worked obsessively. The family that Marcus had worked so hard to rebuild was fracturing under the pressure of his success. That night, Marcus says, "I sat in my office looking at this mountain of problems, the project delays, my son's arrest, Carmen crying herself to sleep, and all I could think was one drink would take the edge off. Just one drink to help me think clearly." The one drink turned into a 3-day bender. Marcus disappeared from the job site, ignored calls from Carmen, and drank like he was making up for 8 lost years of sobriety. When Marcus finally came home, the damage was beyond anything he'd imagined. Miguel, who had looked up to his father's sobriety as proof that people can change, was devastated. "Dad always told me that addiction was a disease, but that recovery was a choice. When he relapsed, I felt like everything he taught me was a lie." Sophia, now 14, had lived her entire conscious life with a sober father. Seeing him drunk was traumatic in a way that Marcus hadn't anticipated. "She looked at me like I was a stranger," Marcus says. Like this monster had replaced her father. But it was Carmen's reaction that broke Marcus's heart. Not anger that he could have handled. It was the quiet resignation, the exhausted acceptance that maybe this was just who Marcus was. "She didn't yell or threaten to leave," Marcus tells me. "She just looked at me and said, 'I can't do this again. I can't keep believing that this time is different.' That's when I knew I hadn't just relapsed. I destroyed the foundation of trust that took 8 years to build." That night, Marcus called me. When Marcus called me at 3 a.m., I heard something in his voice that I recognized, not just the shame of relapse, but the devastation of having hurt the people he loved most. "Marcus," I told him, "you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're focused on the drinking, but the real damage isn't the alcohol. It's the broken trust. And trust can be rebuilt, but it requires a different kind of recovery than what you did the first time." I shared with him something I learned from my own family struggles. "The first time you got sober, you did it for yourself. This time you need to get sober with your family. Recovery can't be something you do alone and then bring home. It has to be something you do together. I explained the difference between individual recovery and family recovery. Your family lived through your addiction. They lived through your recovery, and now they're living through your relapse. They need healing just as much as you do, but they also need to know that this time is different. Marcus asked me how he could possibly rebuild trust after breaking 8 years of sobriety. I told him, trust isn't rebuilt through time. It's rebuilt through consistent, transparent action. Your family doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to be accountable. Over the next month, Marcus and I worked together on what I call family-centered recovery. Healing that includes everyone affected by addiction. First, Marcus had to get honest about his relapse triggers. You got complacent about your recovery because success made you feel invincible, but addiction doesn't care about your success. It waits for stress, isolation, and overconfidence. Second, we involved Carmen and the kids in his recovery plan, not as caretakers, but as partners in healing. Your family needs to understand addiction as a disease, while also holding you accountable for managing that disease. Marcus started family therapy alongside his individual counseling. Miguel and Sofia learned about addiction as a chronic condition that requires ongoing management, not a moral failing that defines character. What I learned, Marcus says, is that my first recovery was about proving I could stay sober. This recovery is about building a life where sobriety serves my family's well-being, not just my own. 6 weeks after his relapse, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone. He temporarily stepped back from his construction business to focus on family recovery. I realized that the same work obsession that built my business also triggered my relapse, Marcus explains. Success without balance isn't really success if it costs you your sobriety and your family. Marcus brought his family into his recovery process in ways he never had before. Family meetings where everyone could express their feelings about his addiction and relapse. Open communication about triggers, stressors, and warning signs. Carmen and the kids attending Al-Anon meetings to understand their own healing needs. Transparency about his recovery activities, therapy sessions, and ongoing challenges. The breakthrough came when Miguel told his father, "Dad, I'm not mad that you're an addict. I'm mad that you tried to protect us from your struggle instead of letting us help you manage it." Marcus realized that his shame about addiction had kept his family on the outside of his recovery, making them feel helpless when he struggled instead of empowered to support his healing. What Marcus taught me through his relapse and recovery is that addiction affects the whole family, so recovery has to heal the whole family. Here's what every family dealing with addiction needs to know. First, a relapse isn't a failure of recovery. It's information about what needs to change in your recovery approach. Marcus's first recovery focused on individual sobriety. His second recovery focused on family healing. Second, trust isn't rebuilt through time alone. It's rebuilt through consistent, transparent action. Your family needs to see your recovery process, not just your recovery results. Third, shame is the enemy of sustainable recovery. When you hide your struggles from family, you rob them of the chance to support you, and you increase the pressure that can trigger relapse. Fourth, success can be a relapse trigger if it leads to complacency about recovery maintenance. The more successful you become, the more important it becomes to stay connected to recovery community and practices. Fifth, family members need their own healing process. Carmen, Miguel, and Sofia weren't just affected by Marcus's addiction. They developed their own coping mechanisms that needed addressing. Sixth, recovery is not about perfection. It's about progress and accountability. Marcus's family learned to see his addiction as a chronic condition requiring ongoing management, not a character flaw requiring constant vigilance. If your family is dealing with addiction or relapse right now, remember what Marcus learned. Recovery isn't something you do for your family. It's something you do with your family. Your family doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to be honest about your struggles, transparent about your recovery process, and committed to healing together. Marcus is 10 months sober today. His business is thriving, but more importantly, his family is healing. Miguel is proud of his father's honesty about addiction. Sofia feels safe asking questions about recovery. Carmen is Marcus's partner in sobriety, not just a worried observer. The difference? This time, Marcus's recovery includes his family's healing. His sobriety serves their collective well-being, not just his individual struggle. That's not just recovery, that's family transformation. Remember this, addiction may be a family disease, but recovery can be family healing. Your relapse doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of a stronger, more honest recovery that includes everyone you love. Marcus learned what every person in recovery needs to learn. You don't recover from addiction alone, and you don't stay sober alone. Recovery is a family journey, and healing happens when everyone gets the support they need. That's not just sobriety, that's family freedom.